Why you always feel misunderstood. The quiet ache of not being seen. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and felt this strange hollowness in your chest? Not because the words were harsh, but because they missed. You tried to explain something that mattered to you. You thought you'd made it clear. But what came back wasn't understanding. It was confusion, defensiveness, a blank look, or worst of all, a kind smile that meant let's move on. And that moment, so small on the outside, echoes somewhere deep inside. Why does no one ever really get me? It's not dramatic, this feeling. It rarely explodes. It leaks, a slow, steady drip of disappointment that shapes how we speak, how much we share, even how close we let people get. Over time, it can turn into something heavier. We start editing ourselves mid-sentence. We stop bothering to explain the messy parts of our story. We laugh things off that actually hurt. Because somewhere along the line, the cost of trying to be understood felt higher than the reward. But what if this pain, of being misunderstood, isn't just a communication glitch? What if it's telling us something deeper about how we see ourselves, how we're wired emotionally, and what we expect others to know without us ever saying it? The invisible script inside us. At the core of feeling misunderstood is often a silent belief: if they really knew me, they'd understand without me having to explain so much. It sounds romantic, almost like soulmates should just get us on a psychic level. But in reality, it's not just a belief in romantic idealism. It's often a relic from early emotional conditioning, the way we first learned, or didn't learn, how to be seen. Psychologists call it an internal working model, a mental script shaped by our earliest relationships. If, growing up, we had caregivers who consistently reflected our feelings back to us, who noticed when we were upset, curious, or withdrawn and helped us name it, we built a kind of internal mirror. We learned, my emotions make sense. I can express them. Someone will respond with attunement. But if our emotional signals were misread, dismissed, or only selectively validated, "Don't cry, you're fine," or "Why are you being so sensitive?" we learned to second-guess our inner world. We might have developed a version of communication that was more about managing others' reactions than expressing truth. And so, a subtle but powerful expectation took root: people probably won't get me. I have to either over-explain, stay quiet, or perform a version of me they can accept. This is how feeling misunderstood stops being about this conversation and starts becoming the emotional echo of every conversation we've ever had where the message didn't land. Where our sincerity was mistaken for drama. Where our boundaries were read as rejection. Where our silence was misunderstood as disinterest when it was actually self-protection. Even in adulthood, we carry these scripts into our friendships, partnerships, even therapy. Sometimes, we want to be known deeply, but we don't offer the full map. Not because we're hiding, but because we've learned not to expect the other person to navigate it well. We say, "I'm fine," hoping they'll hear the tremble in our voice. We explain our dreams but leave out the fears underneath, afraid they'll sound silly. We want to be seen, but only if the person knows how to look, without us pointing out the path. So the real question becomes, how often are we asking to be understood without actually giving people the language to understand us? The mismatch between inner world and outer words. Imagine trying to describe a vivid dream you had, colors, sounds, emotions all swirling together, but only having black and white words to do it. You try, but something is always lost in translation. That's a bit what it feels like when our inner world doesn't quite match the words we use to express it. And that gap, that's often where misunderstanding lives. You might be feeling grief, but it comes out sounding like irritation. You might want reassurance, but you ask a sarcastic question. You might feel vulnerable, but the only language you've learned to use is confidence, or silence. So people respond to what they hear, not to what you meant. And then it hurts, not because they're cruel, but because they missed the signal. Again. Here's where psychology gives us a helpful lens: emotional granularity. It refers to the ability to identify and name specific emotions, rather than just saying "I feel bad" or "I'm stressed." People with high emotional granularity might say, "I'm feeling envious and a little ashamed about that." Or, "I think what I'm experiencing is anticipatory grief." This kind of clarity doesn't just help us know ourselves better, it bridges the gap between experience and expression. But many of us were never taught this language. So we reach for blunt words: mad, sad, fine, tired, when what we're actually feeling is more like powerless, overwhelmed, emotionally exposed. And so people misunderstand not because they're inattentive, but because they're listening to a sketch of a story we didn't know how to color in. There's also a cultural layer here, especially for those of us shaped by Western ideals of individualism and self-sufficiency. We're praised for being low maintenance, for not needing too much. We're taught that emotional expression should be reasonable, not too messy or demanding. So we trim the parts of ourselves we fear will be too much, and then feel resentful when others don't see the parts we've hidden. This dynamic often plays out in relationships. One partner says, "I just wish you'd open up more," and the other thinks, "But I did. You just didn't catch it." Or a friend offers advice when you wanted empathy, and you walk away thinking, "You still don't get it. You don't get me." So the pain of being misunderstood compounds. Not only are we unseen, we also start to question whether our way of feeling, perceiving, or expressing is valid at all. And that's the deepest wound, when misunderstanding makes us feel like we're fundamentally unknowable. But maybe we're not unknowable. Maybe we're just using emotional tools we never got the manual for. The role we play, and why it keeps us stuck. Here's something tender but true: the more often we feel misunderstood, the more likely we are to adopt a role, a kind of emotional mask, that ironically makes it even harder for others to understand us. Maybe you've become the resilient one, always fine, always putting others first. You downplay your own needs so others won't worry, but then feel resentful when they don't check in. Or maybe you're the over-explainer, giving people every detail, every angle, as if clarity will guarantee connection. But then you're told you're too much, and you shrink in embarrassment. Or maybe you've taken on the role of the mysterious one, speaking in metaphors, withholding the raw truth because you've learned that people misuse it when you hand it to them directly. Each of these roles started as a form of protection. They helped us navigate a world that didn't always know how to hold our truths with care. But over time, the mask starts to chafe. Because roles are rigid, and people are not. We outgrow the stories we tell about ourselves, and yet, we often keep performing them because we don't know how to step off the stage without losing the script entirely. This is where schema theory from cognitive psychology offers insight. Schemas are like mental blueprints, patterns we've developed about ourselves, others, and the world, based on past experiences. If you've built a schema that says, "People don't get me," you'll unconsciously look for evidence to confirm it. You'll notice when your boss misreads your email tone, but not when your friend sends a thoughtful follow-up text. You'll dismiss moments of connection as luck or flukes, because they don't fit the template. The result? A self-reinforcing loop. I expect to be misunderstood, I guard or distort my expression. Others misread me, I feel misunderstood, I double down on my role and repeat. So if we want to break the cycle, it's not just about finding better communicators to surround ourselves with. It's about asking, am I still playing a role that made sense once, but no longer serves me now? And more courageously, what would it mean to risk being understood, not as a perfect version of me, but as I really am, with all the contradictions? Because being truly understood is risky. It means being seen. And being seen means letting go of the old armor. The unspoken fear behind being understood. Now here's a paradox most of us never say out loud. Sometimes, we say we want to be understood, deeply, accurately, soulfully, but when someone gets close to doing just that, we flinch. It's like standing in front of a mirror that reflects more than you expected. You see not only your carefully arranged features, but the parts you weren't prepared to face. The fear isn't just, what if they don't get me? It's also, what if they do, and they don't like what they see? This fear can run deep, often hidden behind rational-sounding habits, staying vague in conversations, making jokes about serious feelings, or turning questions back on the other person to avoid answering. And when someone does try to connect, they ask the right questions, they reflect our feelings with warmth, something inside us tightens. We might pull away, shut down, or suddenly feel irritated by their kindness. Why? Because being truly understood isn't always comforting. It can feel exposing. Vulnerability researcher Brené Brown puts it this way: vulnerability is having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. That's the catch. To be seen, we have to stop managing how we're perceived. And for many of us, perception management isn't just a habit, it's survival. We learned early on that the world responds better to edited versions of ourselves. Versions that are less needy, less intense, less confusing, less real. So, the experience of being misunderstood becomes a strange kind of comfort. It confirms the script we know. We might long for emotional intimacy, but in a way that lets us keep one foot on the brake. We want connection, but not if it means handing someone else the power to misinterpret, judge, or even truly understand the depths we've worked so hard to protect. And yet, what if the very thing we fear, being seen fully, is also the only thing that can dissolve the loneliness we carry? What if being misunderstood isn't just a failure of communication, but a defense against the risk of real connection? To sit with that question, honestly, tenderly, is a quiet kind of bravery. Learning to speak the language of our inner world. So, where do we go from here? If feeling misunderstood is a product of misaligned expression, outdated roles, and protective emotional scripts, then being understood requires something far more vulnerable than simply communicating better. It means slowly, deliberately, learning to speak the true language of our inner world, and inviting others to hear it. But here's the catch: it's a language most of us were never taught. We were taught to speak clearly, not honestly. To make sense, not waves. To say what's appropriate, not necessarily what's true. So the journey toward being understood isn't just about opening our mouths, it's about reclaiming emotional fluency. That is, the ability to name, describe, and express what we're actually feeling, not just what we think we should feel. In therapy, this often starts with micro-moments. A client says, "I don't know, I just felt weird." And the therapist pauses. "Can we stay there for a second? Was it more like awkward, exposed, lonely?" And slowly, the fog begins to lift. That's emotional translation in action. Not fixing, not analyzing, just giving the vague sensation a name, so it can be known, shared, and held. You can do this with yourself too. When you feel misunderstood, ask gently, "What was I trying to say, beneath the words I actually used? What did I wish they heard? What did I fear they'd see?" It's hard. It takes slowing down when every instinct tells you to rush forward or shut down. It takes resisting the urge to edit yourself mid-sentence or soften your truth to keep things smooth. But that's where understanding begins, not just others understanding you, but you understanding yourself in a way that gives others a fair chance. And it's not about always being eloquent or emotionally articulate. It's about learning to say, "I'm not even sure what I feel right now, but I know it matters." That level of honesty, even in confusion, is powerful. It creates space. And in that space, something shifts. Because here's the secret: people want to understand you. Most of the time, they really do. But they need your help, not your perfection, just your presence. Your willingness to hand them the emotional map, even if it's messy and hand-drawn. And maybe the first step is not demanding perfect understanding from others, but practicing compassionate understanding with yourself, for all the ways you've stayed quiet, all the times you've over-explained, all the ways you've protected your heart from being seen and misread again. Because the moment you start offering yourself that kind of understanding, something softens. And from that softness, new words begin to form. The quiet power of being understood and understanding yourself. Feeling misunderstood is one of those universal human pains that often feels isolating, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. When we shine a gentle scientific light on why it happens, we begin to see that it's less about others failing us and more about a complex dance between our inner world, our communication habits, and the stories we carry about ourselves. Being understood isn't about perfection or mind-reading. It's about honest expression, emotional curiosity, and the courage to let others into our messy, beautiful complexity. It's about giving ourselves permission to speak in imperfect, sometimes awkward ways, because the alternative is silence, distance, and loneliness. The truth is, you are not unknowable. You are not inherently too much or too little. You are a human being navigating a world that doesn't come with a guidebook on how to be seen. But you can write parts of that guidebook for yourself, moment by moment, conversation by conversation. Next time you feel that familiar ache of being misunderstood, pause and ask, what am I really trying to say? What parts of me am I afraid to show? How can I meet myself with a little more kindness in this moment? And how might I invite others to meet me there too? Not perfectly, but authentically. This is no quick fix. It's a lifelong practice. But it's one that brings clarity, connection, and, ultimately, a deeper sense of belonging, beginning from within. So maybe feeling misunderstood is less a sign of failure and more an invitation to understand yourself better, and through that, to open a path for others to do the same. And that, in itself, is a kind of quiet power. If you're sitting with this right now, know that you're not alone. And your story, exactly as it is, deserves to be heard.